But at the Nigerian Oil and Gas Conference, the NBC Africa's Ummu Ibrahim caught up with Herbert Wigwe, the Group Deputy Managing Director, Access Bank, to get his take on growth opportunities in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. She started by asking how the banking sector is participating in the growth we're seeing in that space right now. Take a look.
The financial services sector has grown a whole lot deeper over the past 5 to 10 years in terms of the range of products, in terms of the duration of the funds that they have, and they've been showing increasing support to the oil and gas industry. Several years ago, to support any of the drilling campaigns required by any of the IOCs or the indigenous companies, you would have had to access money from overseas. But more and more, what you see is that the banking sector is coming up and providing funding for them. A lot more can be done, all right, but the institutional framework required to support it needs to be in place. So bottom line, I think a lot more is happening, and also realize that the fact that these local banks are now participating more and more in the financing of the IOCs and the indigenous players is giving greater impetus, all right, to foreign institutions to actually participate a whole lot more.
Now, moving forward, how do you think the Nigerian banking sector can support and improve on the sustainability of crude oil production in the country? Because at the moment, our reserve to production ratio is said to be very, very low.
Bridging the financing gap is not so much the problem. I think there are much more entrenched problems, like things that have to do with security, things that have to do with vandalization of pipelines, etc. Put yourself in the mindset of an institution that is about approving loans or investments to an area that is notorious for vandalization. It's going to be a big, big challenge. Now, so the banks do have the capacity. They've established very strong relationships with institutions overseas who are willing to also support them, either directly through on-lending facilities or actually co-invest with them. But until some of these issues are resolved that have to do with security, vandalization, and I'm now talking about a broad range of measures, all right, to resolve it, not just an amnesty program or sending security people. There needs to be much more, robust structure to resolve that problem. Once that problem is resolved, I think you will see a lot more investment flowing in that direction. Nigerian banks have done it in several industries. In the telecoms industry, they've done very significant investments, and that is one sector that consumes just as much money as the oil and gas. They've also done it in cement, so why would they do it in the oil and gas sector?
We've seen a huge investments coming from the banking sector to other important sectors of the economy, like the telecom sector. When are we likely to see these kind of investments from the banking sector to the country's oil and gas sector? Because it is very, very crucial at this stage to get these kind of investments coming from the financing sector.
They are coming in gradually more and more now, but I think, like I said, the government has to address the larger issues, larger reforms, all right, for you to see it coming in the critical mass that you're envisaging. And I don't think it's something that is far-fetched. I think it's something that can be resolved quickly, and banks are looking for good investment outlets anyway. All right, so once that is resolved, you would see it coming in more and more. But it's happening already. Different institutions, some of the IOCs are farming out some of their projects to indigenous oil companies that are being financed by local banks. All right, but if we need to bridge or increase the reserve production ratio, which is what is important now, all right, we need to resolve some of those other things.
Now, Nigeria's downstream sector is faced with quite a lot of challenges. When do you think is the right time for the Nigerian government to pursue what will aid the establishment of refineries to, refine the country's crude oil? What do you think is the problem, and what is stopping us from achieving this?
I think, first of all, we must look at the entire reform structure around regulation or deregulation. There are issues for regulation and therefore subsidy, but in the wider economic theory, I think there are more points for deregulation. The issues around subsidy, as we know, have been very topical in the recent past. We also know that there is no reason for anybody to come and set up a refinery if it is cheaper for somebody to bring it from overseas, etc. So they have to look at things that have to do with deregulation. Now, if you look at the subsidies that have happened over the past couple of years, there are multiples of what is required to set up strong refineries, all right, that will be competitive. An average refinery that will produce, that would refine 200,000 barrels of oil per day would at most cost $5 billion. Now, Nigeria would probably consume maybe 600, 700,000 barrels per day, given the enlarged population of 160 million people. And that would mean maybe 3 viable refineries at that stage. Now, let us even say they were split. That would mean, what, $15 billion. Given the subsidies that we've been doing, all right, I think we can basically solve this problem. And it's a problem that is solved once and for all. Now we actually have the raw material, all right, to produce these products. Why do we have to export this raw material for people to add value and we bring it back to ourselves at a much higher cost? So I think issues around deregulation and taking away of the subsidy so that the right price will be found is what is important for that to happen.